It's 9:01 on Wednesday, March the 9th. The House Criminal Justice Subcommittee is now in session. Madam Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Beck, Curcio, Farmer, Griffey, Hardaway, Howell, Lamberth, Moody, Russell, Sexton, Chairman Doggett.
Present.
Chairman Doggett, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any personal orders before we begin today? Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a birthday of a member of the committee today. Representative Jerry Sexton has a birthday today. If y'all could wish him a happy birthday, please.
Happy birthday, Jerry. Anyone else? Well, I will take a personal privilege today. My son, who made me a father 11 years ago today, is here with me today. Cole Doggett, sitting right over here in the corner. So he and my good friend Jerry share a special day. Very special day. Mr. Tyler Muniz, our Sergeant of Arms, will have our words of wisdom for today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a proud constituent of the 45th District. I'm here with the words of wisdom for today. For one man to have friends, he must show himself friendly. A friend loves at all times.
Thank you very much. We're going to have a very robust calendar that we'll be working through today, and we are going to start by looking at a few items that need to be addressed. Item number 9, House Bill 2578 by Representative Dixie, roll 1 week. Item number 13, House Bill 2445 by Representative Whitson, off notice. Item number 14, House Bill 2707 by Representative Darby, roll 1 week. Item number 19, House Bill 1756 by Representative Freeman, off notice. Item number 21, House Bill 2200 by Representative Thompson, off notice. Go all the way to 60. Item number 60, House Bill 2440 by Chairman Farmer, is off notice. Brings us back to item number 1, House Bill 2087 by Representative White. You have a motion and a second. There is an amendment. Do you wish to proceed with the amendment?
13821, is that the correct one on your?
That is correct. You are recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, members, and thank you for letting me come before you. This bill I have before you, I'm bringing on behalf of my local government. I have a letter from the mayor of the city of Memphis. I've had this bill for a few years, about 3 years now, and I understand a lot of the issues. A number of years ago, we passed a bill, which I voted for and very supportive, that we can keep guns in our cars as law-abiding people. I remember one time I was coming back to Nashville about 11 o'clock. I'm coming back from Memphis to Nashville about 11 o'clock one night. As soon as I got on the east side of the Tennessee River, traffic backed up about 11 o'clock, and it was pitch black. And I was so grateful that, you never know what's going to happen when you're sitting in traffic for hours. I actually fell asleep there for a little bit. It was backed up that long. But I was grateful that I could have a gun in my car in case someone came along that would threaten me. So I'm very supportive of that. But as a result of that, in the city of Memphis, we've had, like last year, we had 2,223 of these guns stolen from our cars. And it does cause our law enforcement community issues as well as all of the safety of all of us. So I've been trying to look for a way, and is there any such thing as a simple bill? I have found that there is not. So I was looking for a way just to bring if nothing more, to bring attention to the fact that we as law-abiding citizens, when we have these great rights and these freedoms to do that, that we do have a responsibility so that when you get out of your car, if you keep a gun in your car for your protection, which we all support, when you get out of your car, secure it in some way. Either lock it in the trunk or have a secure lock box that's bolted to the seat or in the glove compartment where it locks up. Just don't leave it under your seat or on your seat and things of that nature. And so, but we never want to have a punishment. So it's a handgun now, not a long gun or a shotgun, just a handgun to keep it secure either in your vehicle or your boat, if you're out in a boat also. And then we ask you to report it within 24 hours once you know that it's missing. Now, you may not know it's missing for a week. You may have been on vacation and whatnot. And we never could come up with, it's hard to, why should you pass a bill and then you just, resolution. You can do that too. But it says if you have it stolen and you don't report it and it's used in the commission of a crime, you need to go to gun safety school. There's something like that. But I think we need to get the attention of those who leave guns in cars, because a criminal's going to do what a criminal does. A criminal's going to steal. And so we just want to bring attention, especially in our larger cities, and this is a problem in Nashville and across our state. Lock your gun up when you're not in your car and to keep away from a criminal. And with that, I renew the motion.
Any questions for the sponsor on the amendment, Representative Griffey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing this bill. I'm just opposed to it, though, because for this reason, I don't know many people that are leaving their guns in plain open view in their vehicle. That's just asking for a disaster. But I think what we're doing is we're putting a bigger onus and burden on law-abiding citizens rather than focusing on the people that are breaking the law by breaking into our cars. And I would suggest a possible solution that might address this problem even more effectively is to let people carry their guns wherever they want to go. That way they wouldn't have to leave them in their car. And I do appreciate the problem with guns being stolen out of vehicles. We have a lot of people are opposed to camera systems, but I think, conduct that is conducted in public is free on display for anybody that happens to see what a person is doing. And I don't necessarily think it's over-intrusive to have public safety cameras in public areas, particularly ones you've got a high incident of crimes and being committed, particularly breaking into vehicles and so forth, to put some cameras up there and monitor that. I think it's a good, effective way to use limited law enforcement resources to address and focus on the high crime incident areas. So I appreciate your bill, but I'm against it. And thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you very much. And I don't disagree with anything you said, just the fact that they are being taken. And somehow we just need to, whatever the solution is, just make sure that it doesn't get stolen out of your car. If you do leave it in your car, when you're not in the car. When you're in the car, I got an email from someone that says, if I keep my gun locked up, what good is it to me as I'm driving along? Well, no, if you're in your car, you can keep it on the seat with you if you want to. It's just when you're not in the vehicle.
Representative Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman White. One thing that I thought of, so I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I can tell you something that happened that makes me wonder what would happen in this case. I had a friend, this has been, excuse me, at least a couple years ago, that was in the Wolf Chase Mall area. She pulled in the parking lot and noticed the car in front of her. There was a man sitting there, but, she figured wife's in there shopping. So she gets out of her car, uses the key fob to lock it. She came out, a few hours later. Her car was ransacked. Not a window was broken. So they have the ability to override a key fob to get into your car. And they were saying that the best way to lock your car is to use the button inside on the door. Mm-hmm. Don't use the key fob because they have ways of overriding it. So what would happen to somebody that had done everything right, and yet they still are able to get in your car? So that scenario and what happens. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's what I'm saying. If you do have a gun, then lock it in your trunk or have a secure lockbox. You stuck it in where we had an incident where in Memphis where the person, I won't say who it was, but they had it in a secure lockbox, but it was just under the seat. It wasn't secure, so you pick up the whole thing and walk off with it. But I understand all those, and it's just with 2,000 stolen out in our communities where we have a lot of crime anyway, because a criminal's going to steal. We might as well, we can get used to that. So I appreciate that.
Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman White, thank you for bringing this bill. In Nashville, we have the same problem, but I want to emphasize that the majority of these are stolen at the people's homes or street parking, and they're leaving their cars open. That just blows my mind. Number one, that you'd leave your car open, period. And number two, that you would leave your car open with a firearm in your car. We've got to do something to wake people up, to let them know it's not all right to leave your firearm in your car and your car unlocked. That just I can't fathom that. So anyway, this will help remind people, and I think it's a good thing to do. We've got to do something to curb this. Thank you.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to my friend from Davidson County, I will say that I have for years asked for good statistics on that, because I agree for those of us that carry firearms on a regular basis, either in our car or a person, your car needs to be locked. However, when asked for statistics on how it is determined how many cars are unlocked, many of those statistics are developed through investigation and interviews of the very thieves that stole the items. So I have long doubted the veracity of how many of those thieves are honest about whether or not the car was unlocked or locked. So I'm still looking for those numbers. I would like some sort of objective standard instead of having to take the word of a thief as to whether or not the car was unlocked. I find it just almost unbelievable that the number of people are leaving their car unlocked that is claimed in some of these numbers. But I join you in saying, please, for goodness sake, lock your car regardless of whether or not you have a firearm in there. Just lock your car. In this day and age, it's not that hard to just click it, lock it, and get it over with. But I have a feeling a lot of those thieves are lying about whether or not the car was unlocked.
And thank you very much. And I don't want to take a lot of the committee's time on this because I understand the objections. We just need to do something to bring attention to those of us who are law-abiding. This is an issue, especially in our larger cities, and we need to be aware of that. And so I'm looking around the room. As far as on the committee anyway, and I know this is a tough bill, and I never want to do anything to penalize a law-abiding, but as a law-abiding citizen, I do think I have a responsibility with my gun ownership. That's why keep them locked up and secure when they're not on my person. So just at the will of the committee on this. If you got ideas on how we can keep on putting this out as information to our law-abiding community, we're so privileged to be able. And if I don't want to get off context here, but I will say this. The wisdom of our founding fathers who gave us the Second Amendment, you look over in Europe right now and they're handing out guns to their citizens. We're very blessed that we have this right, because things like that happen where the citizens are under attack. So it's a great responsibility and a privilege to be able to have guns, but it's also a responsibility that we secure them against the wrong people who get them and use them in commission of crimes.
Question's been called on the amendment. Any objection? Withdraw. Thank you. I still have three more here. Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate what you're trying to do, and it is a tough situation. I'm not sure that I completely understand. Are you saying that if you leave your weapon in a car and you lock it up and it's stolen, that you have a responsibility to turn that into, or to report that to law enforcement? Is that correct?
Yeah, most people, if you have anything stolen in your car, whether it's a laptop, a gun, or anything, you report to law enforcement and report that so that it's out there that you have stolen property. And you need that for insurance as well.
Is there any kind of, penalty or a fine if?
On this
Yes.
bill, the only thing we put in there is if you don't report it and the gun is used in commission of a crime, then you need to go to gun safety training school.
So with all due respect, I think what you're doing with this, and whether it's intended or not, you're penalizing law-abiding citizen for the act of a criminal. And that's not a good thing. I'm have to reemphasize what's already said. I think we ought to be able to carry our guns wherever that we want to and not have to leave them in the car. But I appreciate your concern, and I know you as an individual that you have great concern for your community and want to try to do the right thing.
Yeah, no, I agree totally with that. You have the right to carry your guns wherever you want to. But if you do leave them in there, secure them where the wrong person can't get them. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and have a great respect for the sponsor of this bill. But a couple of things. I think last year or year before, we strengthened the penalties for stealing a weapon out of an automobile. So we've already done that. And I have a concern that it seems like when we identify a problem, the first thing we do is want to penalize the law-abiding citizen as a solution to that problem. I just think this is not the way to go about it. I know several in my district, people who have permit to carry a weapon or keep it in their cars, and I don't know any of them that are not responsible. I personally, my wife, same way. If we go to the corner grocery store for 5 minutes and run in and get a jug of milk, we always lock our car. If I'm in my driveway, I lock my car. I think most responsible citizens who are gun owners do that. And as you pointed out, if you put it in a lockbox, they can just steal the lockbox and crack it open. If you put it in your trunk, they've got the equipment and bars that they can just pop the trunk. So I'm not sure that this is the way to go about solving the problem, but I do appreciate your intent, but I will be voting against it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate this committee's time, and I'm looking at like at least 6 out of 10, so I'm not going to make you take a vote on this because I understand that. You might want to let us have a summer study or something. We need to keep this before the public, that because it is an issue in our larger towns. In Memphis, 2,000 stolen out last year. So I just want to keep this before the public. All we're saying is we have a right to keep a gun on ourselves and in our cars, but when you're not in your vehicle, lock the thing up so the criminal doesn't get it. And I'm for, as our leader Lambert said last year, let's increase the penalties on the people who steal. I'm all for that, and truth in sentencing, all these things we need to do. But while we get there, we all have a responsibility.
Got Representative Hardaway. You were next on the list.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, sponsor, for bringing the bill. I think you're right. The more discussion that we have on this, the more that we keep it before the public, the more likely it is that those who would want to be responsible citizens will be. And those individuals who may not have thought about what they need to do. Once we start to have the discussions, and hopefully at some time we'll be able to move this to a summer study program if the sponsor wishes, so we can figure out how to balance the rights. And I'm just as much a Second Amendment rights guy as the others. I've got firearms that were handed down from my grandfather that are in my safe now. So I believe in it. And if you come in my house, I'll introduce you to that shotgun that he used for hunting lo these many decades ago. If you come in my house uninvited. Okay? Yeah. And get that clear. Make sure the media gets that clear. But I appreciate your willingness to open the discussion. You know I'm right there with you. Law enforcement has the data that tells us that these stolen weapons are used in criminal activity. We're not guessing at it. They've got the data. And they've got the data that shows when we change our laws, what happens? We change our laws, and when I first got here, I believe in the Castle Doctrine being covering your vehicle. But some of us are in them so much, you ought to have that right to defend your vehicle. But we also need to be responsible so that weapons aren't stolen without some resistance. And asking someone to lock the car, put the weapon out of sight, put it in a locked box that's somehow adhered to the vehicle or tethered to the vehicle is not that much to ask. We do a lot of regulations. And I think the courts have upheld that, sure, you've got some constitutional rights when it comes to the Second Amendment, but the state has some rights to move forward with regulations to help keep us responsible and help keep the community safe. We have stolen weapons that are used in criminal activities, shooting citizens, shooting law enforcement officers, children using weapons. It's out of hand. I thank you for trying to find a solution. I'm with you on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Representative Hardaway. And Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm not going to take any more of the committee's time. I'm a smart young man, and I can look at 80% of the vote count. I've made my point, is that we as citizens, I hope this continues to get out there. So I'm willing to take this bill off notice at this time. And I would just appreciate anybody's help as we continue to look at this problem, that we continue to address gun safety in our communities, and as responsible citizens, just make sure that the criminals can't get a hold of our property. And thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Representative White. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your valiant work to represent your community. And every single bill you come down here and you have tried to bring bills that will make your community safer. And I know your intent on this bill is exactly the same. I know you may be taking this bill off notice today, but I know that your efforts to continue to support your committee will continue. So I just want to say to those that may not know kind of the inner workings of the legislature or how hard you have worked for this topic. I just wanted to commend you on how hard you've worked to try to make your community safer, and not just in this bill, but in so many other bills. And this may not be exactly the right way to do it, but I know you'll keep working until you get to a way to make sure, again, that your community is safer. So thank you, sir, for your efforts.
And thank you very much for those kind comments. And committee, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Without objection, House Bill 2087 is off notice. Next item, number 2, House Bill 2206 by Representative Todd. Your motion and second, you're recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many of you know, through the pandemic, we've all been made more aware of emergency room conduct and the risk that our healthcare providers have on a day-to-day basis. We've cooped people up at home for a couple of years, and folks have become a little more aggravated, I guess, and agitated, and as they go to our healthcare facilities, some can get unruly. We already have in our code a protection for nurses and first responders from assault and special penalties for that. What this bill does, it just adds healthcare facility security guards and officers to that list of folks that would have an increased penalty for when they're assaulted. These are the folks that are called first. Well before the police are called, they're the first ones that are going to be there to deal with these unruly visitors and patients. And so this just helps add a level of protection. I have folks in my district that are in these positions, and they've shared with me some of their experiences and asked me to bring this so that they would have additional protection under the law. And so this, I would just appreciate your consideration.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions for the sponsor? Question been called. We're now voting on sending House Bill 2206 on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You move on to full criminal. Next item is House Bill 2236 by Representative Littleton. We'll roll her 3 spaces. Next item, House Bill 1934 by Representative Reedy. You are recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to read for clarity pertaining to this bill in protecting our teachers in the classroom. School systems have the legal responsibility to maintain safe, violence-free schools. Part of that responsibility includes the establishment of a code of conduct containing specific consequences for violations of the code. School authorities have the right and responsibility to discipline children, including the removal of children from their present school, when those children violate school rules by engaging in conduct that materially and substantially disrupts the rights of others to be physically safe and educated, when conduct endangers the students or others, temporary removal of that student may become imperative. Schools also have these rights and responsibilities when students with disabilities violate school rules in causing disruption or danger to themselves or others. A child with a disability whose dangerous misconduct is found to be unrelated to his or her disability and whose IEP program and services are appropriate to address the child's needs may be subject to the regular discipline code of consequences. And then from there, we get to talking about disabilities. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA, procedural safeguards were designed to assure that students with disabilities receiving special education and related services were not arbitrarily removed from their parent-approved program without consent or were guaranteed a free and appropriate public education within the least restrictive environment. There is nothing in IDEA that restricts schools from disciplining children with disabilities. In fact, some would say that by not addressing these dangerous behaviors, the student with special needs is not receiving an appropriate education. From there, I'm going to actually read from the fiscal note on House Bill 1934. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, National, 2015 to 2016 Teachers and Principals Survey, 9% of elementary teachers and 2% of secondary teachers reported being physically attacked by a student. It is reasonably assumed 2% or 1,377 teachers will annually be the victims of offense of assault. And then reading from the bill, a person who commits assault against a teacher, first responder, or nurse who is discharging or attempting to discharge the teacher's, first responder, or nurse's official duties if the person knowingly causes bodily injury to the teacher, first responder, or nurse. Many of you familiar with this law that's already in statute that covers first responders and nurses. My question is, all of our schools have nurses in it that are already protected by this law. Why do we not protect the teachers in the classroom? And of course, it was a few weeks ago, finally, I appreciate the professional educators of Tennessee. We've been talking about that the several years that I've been here, trying to figure out how do we protect our teachers. And finally, it was 3 weeks ago, Leader Lamberth, Chairman Subcommittee visited with me, and it was actually Fox 17. 3 teachers anonymously came forward, and I'm not going to share their names or the schools that they work at, but the first lady, the way that she was abused, she said, "I've had enough, I'm quitting teaching." And of course, we're worrying about keeping, we've got a problem, short 2,200 teachers right now, and more find out they don't need this kind of offensive thing to take place against them. Then it was the male teacher made testimony, and it was pretty sad occasion because he said it took him 90 days to finally was able to see a psychologist because there was none available in his situation. And then the third was a younger lady. She said, okay, it's happened to me, but I'm still going to stick it out because I love the children and I want to teach them. But a few bad actors in the classroom, in their lives, are a problem. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will attempt to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for our sponsor, Representative Beck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I first read this bill, I liked it, but what was the dissertation about the children with disabilities that you started off with? I'm not sure how that fit into the puzzle here.
There's a lot of pushback because we do have nonverbal students in the classroom, and the teachers in that, I've been getting pushback from well, it's parents or teachers of these kids with these specific disabilities that would fall under this law, that there potentially could be punishment. But the article that I read from is showing, number one, let me just state this for a fact. It's silly that we need to bring a bill in front of this committee or any committee, that it's the responsibility, and leadership comes from top down, from the LEAs, the director of schools and principals. But I keep hearing that the principals or the school district, or they say, let's not press charges. It was just a one-time situation, but these one-time situations continue happening over and over again. But the premise of that article, and Representative Beck, I'll give you the name of the article and the professor, because the point is those students with disability just have rights like any other kids, and if we're not covering their needs in the school system, we need to find them help as well. But it's disciplining students with disabilities. It came from the National Association of School Psychologists, and the author's name is Kevin P. Dwyer.
What was that last name? I'm sorry.
Dwyer, D-W-Y-E-R. And I can certainly share this article or this document with you if I need so.
Okay. I came in here today ready to support the bill, but I'm going to have to abstain and read this article.
That's fine.
If that's, so just want to let you know where I am.
Thank you, sir.
Leader Lamberth.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring up, for purpose of the committee, and again, appreciate my friend from Davidson County asking that question, and I appreciate your kind of preemptive comments on this particular bill, but I want to clarify something. We are only talking about intentional assault here. So a child with disabilities that is not able to form the intent of intentionally assaulting, I mean, the core part of assault, there's a mens rea there where you have to form that intent, even if it's a second before, but you have to be capable of forming that particular intent to commit assault. If you can't form the intent to commit assault, and I would like to hear this from the sponsor, I would never support a bill, and I don't think you would ever bring a bill that would try to criminalize someone who does not have the mental acuity or, due to disability, the ability to form the mens rea for assault. And so if a child falls into that category and happens to strike a teacher in some way inadvertently or as part of their disability, they do have, there are some children that because of their disability, their body may do things that they have absolutely no control over. This bill in no way affects those children. Is that your intent, sir?
Yeah, yes, Leader Lambert, that is correct. And that's the reason I started with that discussion first, because if there is that problem with our disabled students in the classroom, and if we're not taking care of that particular situation, whatever it might be, maybe it has nothing to do with harming another person, but like I said, right now in the state of Tennessee, we're talking about a new funding formula to do just that, to try to take care of this situation. Of course, it was Monday afternoon that we had Commissioner Swin in front of Government Operations, and I read from this same article to her. I said, what are we doing for teachers in the classroom? Well, we've passed bills in the past, and it's working its way through the system. In the meantime, in my district, Montgomery County, there were 2 teachers abused, and one finally said, I have had enough, and I filed charges. Where's the leadership in the school districts, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that, but I would, friend to friend here, I would like you to answer the question I specifically asked. Is it your intent in any way, shape, form, or fashion for those children that are unable to form the intent for this bill to affect them? Because I would say that the wording on the page is that if you cannot form the intent to commit assault, this bill does not affect you in any way.
That's correct. No, that's not the intent of the bill.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just want to make sure we were dealing with intentional assaults, not anything that was unintentional, not anything that a disabled child might do unintentionally. Because if someone walks up to a teacher and punches them in the face, yeah, they should be punished worse than somebody that gets in a bar fight. So thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Lambert, Leader Lambert, for getting that clarification, because I was stuck on that. I believe that we need a safe haven for education, and that's for teachers, staff, and certainly the children. I'm curious as to how your bill, you have recognized that if we have instances where children who cannot form the intent may be viewed as assaulting or those actions, even though it's not a true assault under your bill, does your bill do anything to move those children into the type of programming and assistance or some type of process or procedure to get them the help that they need?
No, Representative Hardaway, the bill doesn't cover that, but my hope and my intent in the future is people understanding the situation, that there are the students with special needs out there that need the help, and I really think through the new funding formula, as we are being told, it will help those individuals, get them in the right, maybe not the right classroom, but maybe the specific help that they need for their current living conditions or situation in the educational process. But no, this bill does not cover that.
Okay, I'm with you on that. We've got to find a way to match up the children with the resources and make sure that those who are being overlooked, that they get the resources they need, and the parents. A lot of what goes on in the schools starts at home. Amen. Or is controlled by the home environment. So I would encourage you to, when we look at how we match children and resources up, that is family and resources. But I've got teachers out of Memphis, Shelby County, who have chosen to resign as opposed to moving back into the classroom with the threat of violence. They've got the break. Thanks to COVID, they had peace of mind by teaching virtually or some hybrid of virtual education. And when it came time to get back in the classroom, said they didn't plan to put themselves under that type of trauma and stress and resign. So I'm signing on to your bill now that I know that we're not...
what the intent of it is, yes, sir.
Yeah, the true intent. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions for our sponsor? Seeing none, question has been called. We're now voting on sending House Bill 1934 on to full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You move to full criminal. Next item, House Bill 2802 by Representative Grills. You are recognized on your bill, Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Back last December, we were at the Chick-fil-A there in Dyersburg having lunch, and a little girl come up to us, and we'd known for a while, and she was somewhat distraught, and I asked her what was going on, and she said she had to move out of her house because she'd been being followed. And I asked the question, how do you know that? And she said, well, I was sitting in my car, and my phone received an alert saying that someone had put a tracking device on my car. And that troubled me a lot because, I'm in a rural part of the Tennessee, where you don't have to lock your cars that you were talking about earlier. And you could just tell that Shay was she was just torn up over it. So I got to looking into some things about what we had to protect individuals from having tracking devices put on their vehicle or on their person against their knowing. And we really didn't have any type of protection. So what this bill does is create a course of conduct to protect individuals so they can't have a electronic tracking device placed on them without their knowing. The intent of this bill is not to prohibit parents from being able to take care of their children and know where their children are, or put even tracking devices on their children if they're so with the DA's conference, Zoe and I talked over and over and over again, and we feel like we've come to a pretty good place with this bill, and I'd appreciate your support. I'll try to answer any question. But the intent, and I want it to be understood, is not to keep individuals from being able to keep up with their Alzheimer's parent or dementia parent, nor their children that may, they just want to know where their kids are. So the guardianship, we feel like, Zoe felt pretty comfortable that the guardianship would supersede anything this bill might cause some conflicting parts of.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions for the sponsor? Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, and thank you, sponsor, for the bill. Is there any requirement for giving notice to, if it's a child or a dependent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know that would be between the parent and the child. I don't think that, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know exactly how that guardianship works between different parents. But as far as this bill, it doesn't do that. It simply says that if you read, I don't know if you read the bill in its entirety, but notwithstanding a subdivision A includes one instance of placing an electronic tracking device without the consent of a person on the person or in the person's property, and that's really what it is specifically.
All right. Thank you, sir. I think it's a good bill.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Questions called. Any objections? Seeing none, we're voting on sending House Bill 2802 on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes prevail.
Thank you.
You go on to full criminal. You may be excused momentarily. I have next item up is House Bill 2236 by Representative Littleton. Would some go grab her right quick. Well, without objection, we'll roll House Bill 2236, another 3 spaces. Just remind me to elect it. Next item, House Bill 2509 by Representative Grills. You are recognized on the bill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee once again. And that last bill there, I just appreciate the confidence, and that's really close to my heart. And if you could have seen the look on that little girl's face that day, it was tough. But anyhow, back on the current topic here. Currently, state law prohibits owning a short barrel rifle and a shotgun. However, you can own a pistol that has the same function as the SBR, but it has a different brace on it, making it legal. In June of this year, the ATF is changing the rules, making thousands of Tennessee gun owners double felons overnight. We may not be able to fix the issue, but what this bill does is try to protect Tennesseans on the home front. Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of people here, I believe, that would like to testify.
Any questions for the sponsor before we hear testimony? Seeing none, we're going to go out of session. If you would bring them up to... If you will, Representative, help them make sure they're set up. Please provide your name and for the record, and you'll have 4 minutes to speak.
Good morning. My name is Akil Kadir, and I live in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm a retired Buffalo police officer who moved down here 15 years ago. And I moved down here because I love the freedom down here, to be honest with you, as opposed to where I'm from. Down here, I still work on federal contracts, teaching law enforcement officers to shoot, and I also run a small company called Citizen Safety Academy. And what we do at Citizen Safety Academy is we do what we call gateway instruction, meaning we tend to gear our instruction toward people who are normally not within the general gun culture. So we get a lot of youth, we get a lot of women, we get a lot of elderly people. And there we found that the use of SBRs, for example, and shotguns, especially SBRs, to be very helpful because of their lightweight and everything. And we find that a lot of our elderly people, because they're smaller and easier to use, they seem to like them a lot and find them easier to shoot, and then, if they need to defend themselves. One concern I have when I about this law and the changes with the ATF is when we were purchasing those rifles and those pistols to actually use for our students, we obviously wanted to stay within the law, and so we were following very closely the ATF rules and regulations, and we made sure that everything we bought had, at least in the case of this one, had ATF approved on it, and most of them came with letters from the ATF saying that those particular pistols were legal to use. We wanted to cover ourselves and make sure that everything was up and up as it should be. And if you know anything about this, and I'm speaking this as a retired cop who spent almost 20 years doing it for a living, that the laws can be very difficult to understand and very confusing. And when I was looking at what the ATF is proposing to put out this summer, I don't see how you can avoid getting in trouble with this thing. I don't. And my fear is that there's tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of law-abiding citizens who will literally become felons overnight if this thing goes through, if we don't offer some type of protection for them. I'm concerned because many of my clients and who have bought these things and are completely legal with what seem to be papers and permission, and now we're afraid that these people might get in trouble and that I might have had something to do with that. And so I'm hoping that that we can do something here in the state of Tennessee. It's funny because I often go back to Buffalo. Sometimes I still have family there, and the culture there makes it very difficult in this same way. And I'm hoping that that we don't end up like that. Have any questions?
Thank you. First, thank you for your service in law enforcement, and thank you for what you're doing in your communities with your gun safety schools and programs. Representative Hardaway, you'd like to pose a question?
Yes, sir. The weapons firearms that we're talking about that this bill would impact, for what purpose would those firearms be used?
For personal defense, personal safety. One nice thing about those pistols is that they're much easier to transport. When it comes to moving from state to state, for example, if you want to go visit your aunt in Mississippi or a different state where a certain firearm pistol may not be able to be carried, a larger pistol, which is easier to shoot for some people because smaller pistols are harder to fire, a larger pistol which is easier to shoot, and is actually covered under the law to transport from state to state in a legal manner.
So is this kind of like a 410 with a pistol grip or something?
I'm sorry?
Is this kind of like a 410 with a pistol grip?
No, it's more like it looks something like a rifle, but it has a shorter barrel, and because it's larger and the weight of the pistol soaks up the recoil energy, you find that elderly, youth, and smaller people are actually able to fire it better and be more accurate with it, which actually is safer for the community.
Right. So it's the same caliber as a pistol, but just a much longer barrel.
Sometimes, yes.
And why? Well, your interpretation on why the feds are regulating it differently.
I don't know. I don't understand why the ATF has changed its mind so often on that. I don't know if it's something, politically going down in Washington, but when I look at the regs, and they're coming up with some type of checklist, and when you start to check off the boxes, it's literally almost impossible to keep what we have now and what we've been allowed to use stay within the bounds of the law. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that, but I would hope that the state of Tennessee would offer Tennessee residents some protection from that.
Hey, I can't think of how it delivers the load any faster, maybe more accurately, but otherwise...
it's easier to shoot.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's easier to shoot, which encourages them to actually become proficient with their firearms.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions for our guest? Seeing none, thank you for your time being with us today. We have, who's next on your list that you'd like to proceed with? If you would introduce yourself for the record, you will have 4 minutes for comments.
Good morning. My name is Brian Griffin. I am the owner of Waypoint Defensive, which is a handgun safety school in the state of Tennessee. I've also been a healthcare provider in the state of Tennessee for the past 17 years. With that, I've had the opportunity of reaching out to literally thousands of students and helping them to understand firearm law in the state of Tennessee. That's why I support this legislation, because this legislation actually helps to eliminate one line of code that is very troublesome. This one line of code technically can make it illegal for the possession and ownership of a shotgun. You go, wait a second. In this room right now, I assure you, there's dozens of people who have a shotgun at home. It's a prominent form of self-defense. It's usually passed down from generation to generation. But by this law, technically, that can be interpreted as being illegal. The second big thing that this legislation does in the elimination of this one line of code is readdressing the concept of SBRs, or short-barreled rifles. This is already regulated by the ATF through a very convoluted, difficult to understand matrix of assessment points. Tennessee makes it illegal again. So in theory, it's completely plausible for someone to have, who falls out of those regulations by accident through, and be charged on a federal level and a state level as well. Well, that sounds kind of weird, but what's the probability of that happening? Surprisingly, it could very easily. The ATF has a tendency of changing those regulations and those codes on almost a monthly basis, and it's hard to understand. So if we don't watch out, we have law-abiding citizens who have navigated that matrix to make sure they have in possession legal firearms, and then all of a sudden we can accidentally double charge them with the same criminal activity on both a federal and a state level. So for the benefit of my students that I have and the other Tennessee residents, I think it's important that we protect them and we don't accidentally place them in a position that they can be charged erroneously for no fault of their own. And I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for your comments and your time. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
I almost asked the other gentleman this, and I want to ask you this. Both of you spoke as if something was being added to the law here to create a new criminal penalty in Tennessee. This bill is one of the simplest and most straightforward I've seen all year. It takes out subdivision A4 of TCA 3917-1302, and I went ahead and pulled it because I want to ask you about this, because you said a while ago that it sounded like you said if this bill passes, somehow or another shotguns are going to be illegal. Hang on. We're taking out the words under prohibited weapons, a short-barreled rifle or shotgun. In your presentation, and I don't know if this was your intent or not, but it certainly sounded like you thought we were adding something in that's going to make something illegal. This bill literally takes out short-barreled rifles or shotguns and says that isn't illegal under the state code. So if you don't mind clarifying something,
yes,
because
sir.
your testimony left me a bit confused as to what your position on the bill is.
Not a problem. This legislation removes that line, so it actually helps out people, okay? This, on the SBR front, okay, it's still illegal, okay? However, this eliminates that line that allows for that double charge. On the shotgun side of things, that line by itself, if interpreted erroneously or with other intent, would make somebody have a criminal act of the possession of the shotgun. This legislation removes that, so we don't have to worry about that accidental charge of someone actually in the possession of a shotgun. Because as it stands right now, that one line can be used for those purposes. This legislation removes that line. Yes.
Leader Lambert.
To clarify, you're in favor of the bill then?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just trying to figure that out. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions for our guest? Seeing none, thank you for your time
sir.
and being with us. You have another guest? That's it? Okay. Okay, there's a motion to go back in session. Representative Beck. Would they like to speak? You'll have 4 minutes. If you would, state your name and for the record.
Patrick Powell, TBI. TBI has concerns about the bill. This will throw us out of sync with federal regulations. Currently, it is prohibited under federal law and state law. However, it is legal under the state if you comply with the National Firearms Act. So anyone who goes through that legal process is fine to own these weapons. This short barrel rifle, short barrel shotgun, I would respectfully disagree with the last presenter that I think it is fairly clear in a legal reading that short barrel modifies both rifle and shotgun. I'm unaware of anyone being prosecuted in the state of Tennessee for owning a shotgun. So again, this would put us out of sync with the feds. I would also like to point out that short barrel shotguns have not been protected by the Second Amendment since 1939 in a unanimous opinion by the Supreme Court in U.S. versus Miller. Even in the Heller opinion written by Justice Scalia, multiple times Justice Scalia refers to the Miller opinion to distinguish the cases and brings up the point that short barrel shotguns are not protected by the Second Amendment. So again, you're going to create a situation where officers would be able to see a weapon they know is illegal on the federal level, and you would prevent them from being able to act without contacting the feds and hopefully having an ATF agent somewhere nearby. We would prefer that the law stay as it is, where law-abiding citizens that go through the proper processes can possess these, but individuals that are possessing these illegally, our state law enforcement could act appropriately.
Thank you, Representative Griffey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate your comments. I'm kind of a strict constitutionalist interpretationist, and it's my understanding back when the Second Amendment was passed, there weren't any laws that bans a citizen from having a cannon at that point if they wanted to. Are you aware of any law back then that prohibited an ordinary citizen, a patriot, someone who'd fought, to throw the British off, the greatest military capable army in the world at that time, beaten by a bunch of citizens? Are you aware of any law back then that prevented ordinary citizens from owning the state-of-the-art technology to fight and weapons under the Second Amendment?
I'm not aware of any law at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, sir. I think you phrased it, being out of sync with federal law, federal policy could cause problems in enforcement.
Yes, sir. I mean, ultimately, you could have any city police officer, any sheriff's department, TBI agent who could witness a weapon that is possessed illegally under federal law and would not be able to act under state law, and would have to simply call and see if the feds were willing to come deal with it, and if not, they would have to send them on their way. So again, there are a number of times where we have crimes that are illegal both federally and state. It obviously puts us in an awkward position when there are weapons or laws that are illegal on the federal side but not on the state side.
And what type of consequences could the state suffer or state officials suffer from the feds or from someone that's harmed because a state official did not take action?
I hesitate to speculate on that, Representative. I apologize. I don't know that I can give you an adequate answer on that.
Right. Will the feds, in your experience and thus your opinion, will the feds have a reaction to this law if it's advanced, this legislation is advanced and becomes law?
Reaction in what sense, Representative?
Will they penalize the state in some way, shape, manner, or form, whether it's funding in some way, or do we know that?
There is nothing to my knowledge. There may be that I'm not aware of. There's nothing that I know of. It will simply be an area where law enforcement can act currently that we would not be able to act going forward.
Okay. And will that pose dangers to the community, to law enforcement officials?
I mean, ultimately, that going back into the reasons why these were prohibited in the first place, yes. I mean, these are more easily concealed, obviously higher firepower, so they do pose an increased danger to both law enforcement and the general populace. That's why they've, again, been unanimously held to be prohibited, or not allowed, I will say, under the Second Amendment. They are allowed under the National Firearms Act if acted upon appropriately by the citizenry.
Okay, that gave me a complete answer. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We're going to go to Legal Services for some clarification. No, please stay. If you would, please identify yourself.
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services. Under TCA 3917-1307FC, a person commits an offense who possesses a firearm and is prohibited from possessing a firearm under any other state or federal law. So anyone possessing a firearm in this state that is prohibited from possessing that firearm under federal law is also violating 3917-1307F.
Thank you. So that would mean that with this current proposed legislation, that they would not, if this was to pass, they could still be prosecuted under state law?
They would be in violation of that subsection 1307F.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list is Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Chairman. So it's against the law to own this type of weapon, right?
Representative, it depends on the circumstances. It is not inherently, it begins as illegal under the code. If you possess it in compliance with the National Firearms Act, then you are legal.
Okay. So you are against this bill?
We believe that it would cause additional problems for law enforcement. Yes, sir.
Why?
Because again, you could see a weapon that you know is illegal under federal law, and you could not act. The state law would not allow them to. Obviously, Ms. Fogarty has brought up another portion of the code, which arguably makes this almost nonsensical because it's not going to complete the whole effort, I think, of the sponsor. So it would be one piece out of two. So law enforcement still may be able to operate under that code, which arguably makes this bill unneeded in general.
Why would you want to act?
Because it's an illegal firearm. Again, they've, at least the courts and prior legislatures, the Congress have found that these are dangerous weapons and are unwarranted under the Second Amendment.
Every firearm that I know of is a dangerous weapon. So I'll ask you this question. Can the FBI, the TBI, any other law enforcement agency, can they have this type of weapon? Or a weapon that is more powerful?
I don't know how I would compare the power.
The answer is yes. We know that they do, so the answer is yes. So it's your position with the TBI, FBI, Which is it?
I work for the TBI.
Okay. So it's your position with the TBI that you think the government, it's okay for them to have this weapon, but a law-abiding citizen under the Constitution of the United States and Second Amendment cannot have this weapon. Is that your position?
No, sir. Our position is that anyone who possesses it lawfully is fine. The problem is that they would be possessing this unlawfully on the federal level. And again, Ms. Fogarty has brought light to a conundrum with the law in this situation, but we have no problems with people who are complying with the law. Law-abiding citizens who have gone through the appropriate processes with the National Firearms Act who possess these weapons legally, completely fine. Law enforcement, if they possess them in a legal fashion, totally fine. It's the individuals who are not the law-abiding, who have not gone through those processes, and then we would not be able to act. Those are the individuals that we
Are you talking about the process of the Second Amendment, where that we have the right to keep and bear arms, and this right shall not be infringed upon? Is that the legal system that you're talking about, or are you talking about something that overrides the Second Amendment?
I am talking about the National Firearms Act and the decisions of the Supreme Court, which were unanimous going back to 1939, that short barrel shotguns are not protected by
So
the
that
Second Amendment.
overrides the Second Amendment.
The court interprets the Second Amendment, and they have interpreted that short barrel shotguns are not protected under the Second Amendment.
So their interpretation is that the Second Amendment is null and void.
I would respectfully disagree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Beck.
My question was answered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hardaway, briefly.
Thank you, sir. Just want to make sure that we're clear. There's a lot of back and forth. This is it's not about whether the Second Amendment remains intact. This is about a process that the Supreme Court has agreed with. There is a process on the federal level for you to own, if you choose to. You can possess these weapons. But there's a process, a federal process. And
yes, sir.
That's, if there's a change according to the legislation, it would put us out of sync with federal law, which has set up a process for ownership. And that's the problem here.
Yes, sir.
And with other portions of state law.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Powell, I do want to apologize. I had you on my list here to testify. Looking at my notes, it's in a different spot than what I was looking for, so I do apologize for not seeing that.
No problem, Chairman.
If there's no other questions for Mr. Powell, you're excused. And
thank you.
We have someone from the Department of Safety that was on our list. Yes, in the back there. If you would, please introduce yourself for the record, and you'll have 4 minutes of testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Good morning, members. James Held, Legislative Liaison, Department of Safety. At the sake of being redundant, I'll just try to talk about the bill as written. As the leader pointed out, it is a pretty short bill. We just, from the Department of Safety is concerned, is just to echo and what TBI mentioned, would love to make sure that this language could be consistent with all of our federal regulations. We understand the intent of the sponsor, and we'd love to see just some language that would just say that it would be consistent with all federal regulations. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our guest, Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, Chairman. And the consistency in enforcement today is because federal and state regulations are in sync.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for the question. To your question about that, we'd love to just make sure that, like you said, everything would just simply be consistent with all federal regulations regarding these type of firearms.
All right, thank you. And I'll just make the observation that when we talk about the Department of Safety, we talk about THP, members, we need to give them folks a raise.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for our sponsor? Representative Sexton.
Just like to ask you the same question I asked the TBI. The Department of Safety works for the state of Tennessee, correct?
That's correct. We're an executive agency.
And you are coming here today and you're saying that you are against citizens keeping and bearing arms according to the Second Amendment. You are opposed to the legislation that's being brought today. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question. And no, sir, we'd like to, as stated, just like to clarify that these regulations would be consistent with the federal regulations. That's all we're here to state.
So you're not against the legislation today?
Our position is to work with sponsor. We'd love to simply add language that it would simply say that we would be consistent with all federal regulations regarding these type of firearms.
So I'm going to interpret what you're saying is, since on the federal side, they're saying that it's against the law. So you're saying you want to be in compliance with federal law, which would make this bill against the law.
Thank you for the question, and I apologize. We'd simply love to just clarify in the law that we'd be consistent with all federal regulations. It's, to our understanding, it would be legal under feds, but would love to be consistent with that language just so it's all compliant in the same way.
I would just like to go on record as saying that personally, I'm tired of departments that work in government lobbying against the citizens and the bills that we have. The departments of the state of Tennessee work for the citizens. It's not the other way around. And the citizens don't have any lobbyists to come, and they just have to take their own time. You're getting paid. Citizens don't get paid. They have to take off work and maybe lose their job. And I think that, and I hope that we pass a bill to stop agencies from lobbying against the legislature that is supposed to, under the Constitution, write the bills and pass the laws that we live by in the United States. And these departments are taking over. So that's my opinion, and I just want to go on record saying it.
I just want to thank you for that, Representative. We're only here today, just to be clear, just from an agency. Would love to express our opinion on what this implementation of this legislation could look like. Not lobbying one way or the other, but just like to advocate for the implementation of the bill as written.
Any other questions for our guest? Seeing none, thank you very much. With that, we've exhausted our list. We will, without objection, go back into session. Representative Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. I think I had 5 bills up at the same time this morning, so I had to run around. In light of the prohibition under 3917-1307F1C that was brought up by Legal Services a moment ago, in consultation with the sponsor, I just want to make sure this bill does exactly what we want it to do, because I know this is an important issue to all of us. And I think, the Senate has still not, published their final calendar yet about this. And so we are not in a hurry. I want to make sure we get this right. And so I would like to make a motion that we roll this to the heel of the final calendar of this committee to make sure that we can clear up that cross-reference that exists. So with that, I'd make that motion.
Second.
That is a proper motion and has been seconded. Is there any objection from the committee? Seeing none. Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my understanding, if this motion is successful, that this will just go to the heel of the calendar. Is that correct?
The heel of the final calendar.
The heel of the final calendar. So the bill is moving forward still. We're just waiting to see that the Senate doesn't just sit over there and do nothing.
It will stay in the committee. If you wish to make any changes or adaptations or leave as is, you are
Okay.
free to do so.
Well, I appreciate the debate here and the questions. You know, obviously, I want to see the thing move forward, but we got to get it in the Senate passed as well. Thank y'all for that. I'm at the will of the committee today.
Okay. Well, we have before us a motion that has been seconded to roll to the final heel of the final calendar. So without objection, we will vote to do so at this time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes prevail. You will be rolled to the heel of the final calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and sorry it took so much of y'all's valuable time.
Members, I'm going to go out of order and get House Bill 2236, which was item 3 by Representative Littleton. You are properly recognized. There is an amendment that we have. Do you wish to proceed with that amendment?
Yes, I do.
Amendment code 13903.
That's it.
Okay. You are properly recognized on the amendment.
And it does make the bill. So I want to read a little bit about where it came from first, if that's okay. Thank you. This bill arrived from a year-long finding from the Second Look Commission, a department of the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. The commission was created in response to the need to review and improve how the state handles severe child cases, abuse cases. We meet along with the child counselors, judges, law enforcement, DCS workers, and many others each month and do a deep dive investigation of these specially chosen cases. The bill I bring today is a result of some of the issues, roadblocks that we find that have resulted in legislation that will help the Department of Children's Services and the Commission on Youth, Children and Youth to do their job and protect severely abused children. So the trauma of children who witness abuse and neglect are in traumatic situations. The children do not have to be alleged victims. The bill changes the definition of child abuse of the purpose of dependency and neglect proceedings. So no one, either the victim or the perpetrator of domestic abuse, would be charged with a crime under this definition. However, DCS could act to protect the child based on a finding of a child abuse under the definition if enacted.
Thank you for that explanation. Any questions for our sponsor on the amendment? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sponsor. Let me get this straight. So basically what we're doing is saying that you don't have to have a physical injury to have to be charged with child abuse. It's a mental injury from seeing a sibling or another child abused. Am I getting it?
You aren't.
Very good.
We see that it's trauma, and they're traumatized by it, and it does include domestic violence, but they're not charged. But if there's domestic violence in the home as well, those children are traumatized by it. And so this just tries to help them get some help and away from that type of abuse for a little while.
Very good. Thank you for bringing this bill.
Thank you. Question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting on sending or attaching Amendment Code 13903 on the House Bill 2236. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, you adopt. We are on House Bill 2236 as amended. Any questions? Question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting on sending House Bill 2236 as amended on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You go to full criminal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you. Next item on the calendar, House Bill 1886 by Representative Gillespie. You are properly recognized. There is an amendment traveling with this here. Perhaps you would like to explore. But What, do you have the amendment number?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amendment number is 014815.
Well, you're recognized on the amendment.
So what this amendment does is it simply changes the language from a vehicle owned by the driver to any vehicle. And with that, I ask for a motion on the amendment.
Question called on the amendment. Any objection? We're now voting on attaching Amendment Code 14815 on the House Bill 1886. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes prevail. You adopt. We're now on House Bill 1886 as amended. Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sponsor, for bringing this bill. My question is this: what if somebody's borrowed a car and then they get out something and the innocent owner is not aware of the person's actions with their vehicle? What does your bill do to address that?
It's my thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my understanding that a lot of this is just the discretion. The agency is not being required to do anything here. So I don't know if I can answer that any differently than that.
Thank you. It's my understanding right now under current law on asset forfeiture, if an innocent owner, a lien holder or something like that on a vehicle is unaware of the actions that their vehicle or conveyance is being used for some criminal purpose, that they have a right to seek recovery, and it would prevent the state from forfeiting the vehicle against those legitimate title interests. So I'm assuming your bill is probably going to operate in the same manner and method so that innocent owners and bank owners that have liens and loans on the vehicles aren't going to lose the vehicle. I just want to make sure we clarify that. And
Yes, sir. That is my understanding, and that is my intent.
Thank you, Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we go out of session and ask legal that particular question? The wording in other bills, and I didn't catch this till Representative Griffey mentioned it, but I think the wording is normally that you forfeit your ownership interest or something of that nature. That's at least how it's interpreted and how it works in court. But I want to make sure that we are addressing that issue where you are forfeiting whatever ownership interest. And usually the way that works is if, say, someone is involved in criminal activity where forfeiture may occur and the process is followed properly, that we've all set up, that they would forfeit their ownership interest. But if like a bank still had a loan on that car, then the actual physical vehicle goes back to the bank. That person forfeits their ownership interest. So if it's a borrowed vehicle, there is no real ownership interest there. It would go back to the true owner. So if you don't mind going to legal with that particular question.
Without objection, we will go out of session. All right. Legal Services.
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services. The bill states that it will be forfeited in accordance with the procedures under Title 40, Chapter 33, Part 2, which is that. Yes.
What I need to know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for legal? Seeing none, we'll go back into session. All right, we're back on the bill as amended. Any questions for the sponsor? Representative Beck.
Just out of curiosity, good bill, and I came in here ready to vote for it, which I have several today. But what was the impetus? What was the impetus of changing the language from what we originally had? The person forfeiture of the vehicle owned by the person committing the offense. What was the impetus in changing that to it didn't matter who owned the vehicle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just my understanding that this just matches up with other sections of the code dealing with this topic. It's just for everything to be even keel instead of going in and changing. I don't know how many other parts of the code that mention this language. We're just simply adapting.
So it's just for clarity? Very good. Thank you.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think I heard my answer. It doesn't change anything about the bill and its effect. It's just a matter of technically trying to get in sync language-wise with other parts of the law.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for our sponsor? Questions been called. Any objections? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 1886 as amended on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You move on to full criminal.
Thank you.
Item number 8, House Bill 2043 by Representative Cochran.
Motion.
You have a motion second. You're properly recognized. There is an amendment, Code 14291. You wish to proceed with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was going to ask, since this one is Representative Curcio's amendment, would you like for him to take that, or I'm fine either way?
Absolutely. Representative Curcio, Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do believe this is a friendly amendment.
It is.
We were looking at the, as we chairmen do, we look at the calendars as they're coming up, and I think this is a very worthwhile effort, but I noticed the fiscal note that was attached to this bill, and I know Representative Cochran works very hard on his legislation in various committees, but in these committees at criminal, we've kind of learned some hard fought, I guess, lessons, hitting a lot of potholes along the way. But so what this amendment seeks to do is to really help alleviate that fiscal note. We find we can accomplish the same thing by making something a misdemeanor so that it's still illegal to sell it. And that's what this amendment seeks to do. So it just helps with the fiscal note. And again, I believe it's a friendly amendment.
Question on the amendment?
Thank you. Question has been called on the amendment. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting on attaching Amendment Code 14291 onto House Bill 2043. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You adopt. We're on House Bill 2043 as amended. Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Essentially, so this bill, the primary substance that we're going after here is something called tyneptine. It's marketed as Zaza Red, and it's truthfully a substance that I had really no knowledge about until recently, and so it had affected a family in my district. It's a substance that you can really go into any gas station and purchase. Has similar effects to meth and heroin. We've got some doctors, I think, who are able to, or a doctor, and then as well as TBI, who would be ready to testify in full. But when they see the withdrawal symptoms, they're again very similar to some very hard-hitting drugs, such as heroin. I wanted to make sure before I brought a law about it. Again, I mentioned that it affected a family in my district. I wanted to make sure that wasn't an isolated incident, that we weren't trying to change code for something that maybe was not a widespread problem. So I contacted the Department of Health and then ultimately TBI, and TBI said this actually is. It's becoming a statewide issue. I believe it's been an issue, Mr. Chairman, in your district, and I appreciate you signing on, as well as Representative Sherrill and others who have seen this affect their communities also. So what this bill does is it makes it where you can't sell it. You just can't sell it over the counter. As Representative Curcio mentioned earlier, we haven't. It doesn't make it a Schedule II because that carries some jail time there, and that attaches that fiscal note. But at least takes it off the shelves where it's not so easily accessible. This is some pretty rough stuff, and so and something that has been affecting quite a few folks across our state. But with that explanation, I will yield to questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sponsor, for bringing this bill. My question is, what the heck is the FDA doing? I mean, why are they even allowing this stuff to be sold in gas stations and convenience store if it's got these kind of effects? Because probably our young people are going to be the folks most susceptible to manipulation and cajoling and using it, and peer pressure. And what is our Federal Food and Drug Administration doing? Thank you.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very fair question, and it's marketed, I believe, a lot of times as some sort of dietary supplement. It's similar. When we saw with bath salts, they were marketed as bath salts, but obviously that's not why people were purchasing them. And when folks are when folks are committed to producing this stuff, they're always kind of trying to stay a step above the law. They're always changing that chemical compound, and this is that latest chemical compound.
Thank you. Any other questions for the sponsor? I do have comments I'd like to make, but I'll reserve them if any of the committee has something they'd like to say. Seeing none, I want to say thank you for your work on this. Also to the various departments that have aided in this. Being a border county in this fine state, it has created issues, and the state of Alabama has been scheduled, I believe, as a Schedule 2. And so what we find is a lot of folks come across the line into my community, and they burglarize convenience stores to get this stuff because they're so addicted. Police chief recently has told me when talking about this that they had a gentleman, an older gentleman with a wife and a family that lived in the lower part of Alabama who had been to this great state on vacation, but had discovered at a convenience store the Zaza Red, or the chemical name of this particular drug, and used it. And in doing so, he became quickly addicted. And he had driven from lower Alabama back across the county line into my district, into my county. And, well, first he stole a car in Alabama to get there, burglarized a store, got caught in the commission of the crime. His wife at home had no idea that he was addicted to these pills. He had been struggling with this addiction for some time. He had been driving back and forth to Tennessee to pick up large quantities of it and hiding it. So it's very bad. We've also had several folks that have had some extremely difficult withdrawals that have come into our local jail because they're not showing up in drug screens for a lot of the things that you're looking for, but they are suffering from terrible withdrawals. So I believe it's a fantastic bill, and thank you for bringing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 2043 as amended to full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You go to full criminal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
Members, we're going to go out of order. We're going to jump up to item number 34. We're going to take quite the stroll there. You have a motion and a second. This is House Bill 2244 by Vice Chairman Ogles. There is an amendment, 15173. You're recognized on the amendment if you wish to proceed.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Yes, sir, I'd like to explain the amendment and put that on the bill.
Go ahead.
Thank you, members. This piece of legislation establishes three new criminal acts, one of especially aggravated rape, the second especially aggravated rape of a child, and the third of grave torture. These are all horrendous acts, and you have a long list of descriptive measures that must be met for somebody to be convicted of these. These are very narrowly going to be applied, and they are some of the most egregious acts that will ever take place in this state. With that, the penalty is very severe, and it has been written that these may apply for death or life in prison without parole. With that, committee, I'll take any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your explanation. Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, questions been called. Any objections? Seeing none, we're now voting on attaching Amendment Code 15173 on the House Bill 2244. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You adopt. We're on House Bill 2244 as amended.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take any questions from the committee.
Questions for our sponsor? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 2244 as amended on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You move to full criminal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee.
Yes, sir. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I happen to see Chairman Vaughn come in the back. Would it be possible to take him out of order on whatever he has on today's calendar?
We have an objection by Representative Hardaway. Let's see. Well, members, we will go to item number 12. House Bill 2247 by Representative Vaughn. Representative Vaughn, you recognized. You have an amendment, Code 13923. Do you wish to proceed with that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Motion. Second.
You are recognized properly on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Last year, I believe it was September 23rd, our community was struck by things you see on television. You don't ever expect them to happen in Tennessee. You don't expect them to happen in Collierville. You don't expect them to happen at your Kroger store. But a gunman came in. He was a disgruntled employee and decided he was going to start shooting people. And when he started shooting people, he wound up killing one elderly lady, wounding almost 12, before cowardly taking his own life. All because of a workplace disturbance or perceived slight. This bill, that's what prompted this bill. Y'all know that criminal justice, y'all don't ever see me in here. This is not one of my, people have different passions and different areas of expertise, and this is not mine. But I do know that on that day, my friends and neighbors went through the door, not just the police force, but the firemen and the EMTs, not knowing what they were going to get into. And as a result of that, and as a result of this, that's not the kind of risk that these people have to deal with. They deal with physical issues, fire, things from nature. They don't deal with meanness and evil. And that's what they encountered that day. So what this does is this bill proposes increased penalties for those who do harm to first responders beyond just the police. There's some elevated penalty clauses in here. And again, what my purpose in bringing this bill is to draw attention to the fact that evil doesn't discriminate against only policemen. It discriminates against anybody in uniform doing their job. And we'd like to call attention to that fact and maybe draw awareness to that fact for the people, the other first responders, and then put evil where it belongs. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Griffey, on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Vaughn, for bringing this legislation. I fully agree with it, and I've passed around a sign-on sheet to everyone on the committee, and I believe everyone signed on, except maybe the chairman. He hadn't had a chance yet. I don't know if he wants to sign on it as well.
I would
get this
actually
to
love
you.
to sign on to this. Thank you, and thank you for bringing this. The amendment does make the bill, is that correct?
Yes, sir, it does.
Question has been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're now voting on attaching Amendment Code 13923 on the House Bill 2247. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You adopt. We're on House Bill 2247 as amended. Any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 2247 on to full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You move to full criminal. Thank you.
I promise I'll get better at presenting it and talking about it when I get to full criminal.
You did just fine. Thank you. We're taking our leisurely stroll backwards to item number 10, House Bill 2252 by Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
We're on item number 10, House Bill 2252.
Yes, sir.
You are recognized. There is an amendment, Code 13913. Do you wish to proceed with that amendment?
Yes, sir, I do, please.
Thank you. Recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, sir. And what this amendment does is when we first drafted the legislation, the level of criminal littering didn't reach the level that I thought was too light. It was not enough litter. In fact, it was almost as if somebody threw a piece of trash out there in the community, and we were tying it to this bill. So, but what I wanted was an aggravated level of littering, which, you know, based on this is 100 pounds more and, 30 cubic feet in volume. So this person, whoever's doing this littering, they were literally dumping in that community. So that's why that's what the amendment does.
Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor on the amendment? Leader Lamberth.
Thank you to the sponsor. Just a question. So I was trying to scan down through here and see if this increased penalties on these individuals or what the potential remedy was. And is it accurate to say that the remedy is that these individuals would be barred from that community? I was trying to figure out, or is the increase in penalty, what is your intention as far as what it would cause with that increase in weight?
Yes, sir. So I would have to get on the bill. That's why I want to get the amendment on the bill so I can explain the entire thing, if that's okay, if you're okay with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Come back to me.
Absolutely. Any other questions on the amendment? Seeing none, we're voting on attaching amendment number 13913 on the House Bill 2252. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You adopt. We're on House Bill 2252 as amended.
Yes, sir.
Representative Parkinson, you can.
Thank you, sir. And Leader, so back in 2015, I believe, we passed this bill, the Neighborhood Protection Act. And the Neighborhood Protection Act outlined some, in my days being on criminal committee, as a matter of fact, it outlined some criminal activity, pretty harsh criminal activity, that would allow neighborhood associations, watch groups that were formally recognized either by their law enforcement agency or the state of Tennessee through the Secretary of State's office, and also that had an outline of their boundaries. Right, so these are the things that had to be in place for this Neighborhood Protection Act to kick in, and some of those laws that were included in the Neighborhood Protection Act were rape, and I can't think of all of them right now. I would have to refer to legal, but they're pretty serious violations, and you had to be convicted of those violations 3 times, and that neighborhood association, as an organization, could then petition a judge to see if that judge would allow a restraining order to keep that person out of that neighborhood because they had intentionally victimized that same neighborhood and been convicted of it 3 times. So they were targeting this neighborhood. How that original bill came about is I had a constituent who was a nurse that said she came outside at dusk that morning, right, and she saw an individual who they knew that lived in the neighborhood. And he was carrying a clothes dryer on his, dusk at dawn, I'm sorry. He was carrying a clothes dryer on his back that he had apparently gotten out of someone's house. And she said, she's a nurse at one of our hospitals. She said, now I'm afraid to go to work, right? And I said, nobody has to live like that. So we passed this bill that said, because this person who lived with his grandmother in that neighborhood was targeting the people in that neighborhood when they would go to work. And so we passed this law, Neighborhood Protection Act. It was passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate and signed by Governor Haslam. And so what this bill does, burglary, I think, was one of those. If they were convicted 3 times of burglary within those boundaries, then that neighborhood association or watch group could petition a judge as a group so that no one would be targeted as an individual. And then it's up to that judge to decide if they're going to grant that relief or not. And so this simply just adds dumping in that neighborhood and being convicted of dumping in that neighborhood 3 times based on this amount aggravated criminal littering as defined in the code to the Neighborhood Protection Act. That's it.
Thank you. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In hearing the intention of the sponsor on this, if we can go to legal, I just want to make sure those cross-references are all accurately portrayed in the amendment and that it would have to be 3 offenses, and then it gives these organizations an opportunity to go to the judge, and in the judge's discretion, they can, I'm assuming, weigh this. I would like to know what the standard of proof on that is as well, if you don't mind. Just where did we set that at in years past?
Thank you. Without objection, we will go out of session here from Legal Services.
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services. The amendment adds the offense of aggravated criminal littering in those amounts to the list of offenses which the offender must have been convicted 3 or more separate times of committing that offense, and they must have been committed within the boundaries of the residential area. If those elements are met, then the HOA the Neighborhood Watch, or similar organization can seek an injunction or restraining order prohibiting the offender from entering the boundaries of the residential area. The statute itself does not provide for a level of burden of proof.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If no burden of proof is specified, is it a preponderance of evidence? Would that be your?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions for legal services? Seeing none, we'll go back into session. We're back on the bill as amended here. Any other questions for our sponsor? Briefly, Representative Griffin.
I just want to confirm, Representative, there's no pending case involving an HOA with some ongoing dispute that's generated this bill. If you could answer that.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely
That's
not.
all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one question. If an individual lives in the actual community, can they be then banned, removed from their homes?
Yes, sir.
With this?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, they absolutely can, because that individual that had the dryer on his back lived in that community. He lived there. Yes, sir. But keep in mind now that they're specifically targeting this community, and we're talking about 3 convictions of, targeting this community. We're talking about 3 convictions of where they actually did it in that community. So we're not saying 3 convictions if they did it somewhere else. We said 3 convictions of them actually doing it. So there's a high burden that you have to reach in order to, activate this. But yes, sir.
Well, I do know in some instances that I've heard from folks that have talked about that lived in communities, they may have a community dumpster where members of the community put their trash for pickup. They might have an item on the side, a couch that won't fit in the dumpster. They throw it out beside the dumpster. Could they could be charged for littering at that point, because they're not putting it in the proper place?
Not under this. This is somebody that's actually dumping outside of the area where litter is supposed to be placed. So, yes, sir.
Okay. Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Chairman, for your comments and questions in those hypothetical. I kind of wonder if we go to full committee whether we might want to consider and accept. This doesn't include the proper placement of refuse out at the curb for pickup by trash services, something like that. So we don't run into a problem with somebody misinterpreting what we're doing here and then using it as a sword rather than a shield. Thank you.
I do agree with Representative Griffey on that. Would you be opposed to rolling this bill 10 or 12 places, bring an amendment on it next week?
I'm not opposed to rolling it at all, and I'm not opposed to you making a verbal amendment because it doesn't seem like a substantial change to the bill. Mr. Chair, at your,
Well, we won't be making any verbal amendments today.
Okay. Yes,
but we have time. Time is on
Okay.
our side,
Yes, sir.
and if it pleases you, we can
it's a
make
good
that
amendment.
change.
I think it's a good amendment, actually.
Okay.
So, yes, sir.
Without objection. Yeah. We'll roll this bill 10 spaces, and then we can get that amendment done for next week.
Yes, sir. Okay. I got 2 more bills on the calendar, Mr. Chair, if you're okay with me getting them out the way.
We did adopt it. Item number 11, House Bill 2696 by Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee. This is actually a pro-gun bill, pro-Second Amendment rights bill. And let me lead off with that. Every now and then, and let me be clear about the caption too. This does not prohibit law enforcement from participating in gun buyback programs. What it does is it shifts how it's done a little bit, right? And so, most of the time with these gun buyback programs, the people that show up and turn their guns in is who we would call Big Mama or Grandma or Auntie. But I've never seen Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords, Crips Bloods, or any individuals that are gang affiliated showing up, bringing their Uzis and choppers to the gun buyback program for a $50 gas card or grocery card. And that's the honest truth. And while well-intentioned, you know, it doesn't hit its target. And so, and what happens is grandma, who has to make a decision between this one means of protection in her, probably been in her closet, or versus that of a grocery card, in a lot of cases makes a decision, hey, I need this grocery card, or I need this gas card. And so she'll take her only means of protection and give it away for this grocery card or this gas card. I think it's a bit exploitive. And, you know, so in this bill, we're asking that, you know, at least try to meet them at 75% of the value for that gun that grandma is going to be giving to you. And let's use those gas cards and those grocery cards as incentives for grandma to go to a gun safety class, to complete a gun safety class. So that's what this bill does, and I hope that y'all will pass this out and, you know, and move this forward. And it allows people to keep their guns in their homes in more cases than not.
Thank you. Questions for the sponsor, Representative Griffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sponsor. Look, I think the committee appreciates your intent on this bill. I think this bill is a solution in search of a problem, though. It's unfortunate if people are in that position and they're trading away their protection for grocery cards, gas cards, or whatever. I hate to see that. I think the better solution might be to try to address that situation with why are they in that depth of financial and economic strain that they would give up their home protection. So I'm just going to be against the bill, but I appreciate your intent on it. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, just a quick response to that. If you don't
Absolutely.
Mind. Well, I appreciate that, and you're absolutely right. We do need to address the economic situation, but I also submit to you that individuals that are in those economic situations, for the most part, are also in communities where there tend to be more crime. And so they need their protection. And so, you know, we want them to be able to protect their homes if, you know, the rapist, the robber, or someone is trying to do them harm. And so we don't want anyone disarming the most vulnerable of our communities. In fact, we want them to support it by incentivizing them to go to a gun safety class so they know what the law says versus so they're not acting out of ignorance of the law and end up in trouble themselves. So, but thank you for that.
Thank you. Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's funny how the spring weather in Tennessee is. It was so warm last week, but there's a cold breeze blowing this week. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that, so you were prepared with an overcoat if you needed that before you went outside. And because you're my friend, and I just want you to know that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, Tennessee weather is funny. It is. You know, it can be sunny one day, it can be rainy the next day, and it can be raining and sunny at the same time. So I say, hey, do what you please with it. I'm at the will of the committee. If you want to kill it, I say kill it. If you want to pass it through, I think it's some good legislation. I think it's solid, and I think it's pro-gun, and it is Second Amendment rights legislation. So I leave it up to your will.
Question has been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 2696 on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Sorry. I don't. Sorry.
All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes prevail. The bill fails.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
That weather outlook. Do you mind taking up 56, Mr. Chair, or do I need to?
You'll need to wait
Yes,
till
sir.
later in the calendar,
Okay,
sir.
Will do. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, though.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a bill, it's item number 33 on the calendar that Representative Garrett has waited patiently on. It does have a rather lengthy journey through the committee system. If we could take that one up at this time, I would appreciate it.
Well,
And, Mr. Chairman, if there's someone else that's been waiting longer, if if we have enough time to get to both, I would appreciate that. If not, I totally understand.
We'll take up, I appreciate that recommendation and concern for your fellow legislator. We're going to go to item number 15, House Bill 2319 by Representative Hall. If we have time after this, we'll take up that other that you had motioned for earlier. You have a motion second. You recognize Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is very brief and very direct and basically two sentences. House Bill 2319 basically says that if you're arrested for trafficking fentanyl, the bail would be no less than $100,000.
Thank you. Leader Lambert, the question.
Thank you. And Representative Hall, you brought a number of really good bills this year, and the spirit of this is fantastic. Unfortunately, constitutionally, we can't have a bond schedule. I mean, you can't preset an amount of a bond. That has to be an individualized assessment. We could put parameters on something. We can say you should put certain criteria that should be weighted more heavily, but that's a judicial decision made by a magistrate or a judge, and they evaluate the entire circumstance. So to put in a specific amount, unfortunately, I think would endanger the actual bond procedures that we have now, and that is absolutely not your intention. And your intention on this, I know, is to just make sure that if you're manufacturing this poison out there in the communities, is that that's taken seriously at the very first step of the criminal justice system. So I will say that, and I know you'll want to respond to this, and time is a little bit tight in this committee today. I'm going to make a motion that we summer study this with the understanding I know you have aspirations to potentially not be a member of this chamber next year, but maybe a member of a different chamber. I really think we should look at this, and I don't mean that as a summer study of just delaying this or putting it off. I think we should really look at what criteria on bond is put in for those that are dealing drugs, making drugs, and pushing poison out in our communities, and I hope you'll continue that fight. But for this year's purposes right now, putting a specific amount of bond is just simply not something we could do constitutionally in the Tennessee Constitution. So with that, Mr. Chairman, and I want to make sure the sponsor has plenty of time to respond, I would make a motion to summer study this particular bill.
All right, thank you. I will state before we go any further that this is the third calendar for this bill, and so it will need to move to the special calendar.
Mr. Chairman, I'll withdraw my motion. I had hoped to be able to work on this bill with the sponsor and get something that would have been palatable. I'm now being told apparently that on the third consideration of a bill, we cannot do that. I hope we'll all check with the clerk on that, because I thought that was a proper motion at any time that a bill was before us a third time. If that's not the case, then I'm not sure why we're hearing them three times. But I will withdraw my motion and apologize for making it.
Well, thank you, and Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still look forward to working with Leader Lambert as this bill moves forward. My motives are pure. Fentanyl is a very, very deadly chemical, and it has become an epidemic in our great state. And the greatest act of love I can show my constituents, the innocent parties involved, and even the suspect, is to continue on this path of moving the bond to $100,000. And Mr. Chairman, if I need to be moved to the special calendar, I'll be willing to do that, sir.
Chairman Curcio.
I make a motion we roll this bill 10 spaces.
Okay. This proper motion has been seconded. Any objections? Seeing none, we'll roll House Bill 2319 10 spaces.
Yes, sir.
Members, that brings us to the end of our time in this fair weather room here today. We might have just a few minutes for one more bill, however.
Motion. Second.
33. If you would go with me to item number 33. House Bill 2184 by Representative Garrett.
Thank.
All right, you're recognized. There's an amendment 14169. You're seconding, please. Question has been called on the amendment. Any objection? Seeing none, we're now voting on attaching amendment code 14169 on House Bill 2184. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You adopt. We're on House Bill 2184 as amended, please. Question has been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're now voting on sending House Bill 2184 as amended on the full criminal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes prevail. You move on to full criminal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
All right, members, that comes to the end of our journey. We will roll all remaining bills on to next week's calendar. Let me roll. Now we're adjourned.